22nd of July 2000. Well, I assume that's working. So perhaps you tell me again, you started ringing in November 1946.
When I was working in Lancashire.
Yeah. And where in Lancashire exactly was that?
West Horton.
Uh-huh.
Those are the biscuits.
Good. West
Horton.
Horton,
Yes.
which is near where?
It's between Bolton and Wigan.
Oh, right. Is that where you were born?
No, I'm a Brummie.
Oh, I see. Uh-huh.
No, but it was the first post I was offered
Yeah.
as soon as I had finished my course at the college
Oh, I see.
and got my degree.
Oh, right. Yeah. It was a teaching job.
Yes.
Oh. Right.
And then they were short of ringers because the men hadn't come back from the war.
Yeah.
The ban had been lifted
Yeah.
and they were looking out for people who might learn. And they asked me if I would, and I said yes.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when I came home on holiday, I went down to Northfield Church. And then one practice night, it was Jim Turner.
Oh, yes, I know that.
Yes, he said to me, I ought to go to the cathedral. He says,
Yeah.
go and meet George Fern and ask him if you can practice there. Because they've got 10 bells and they can teach you more than we can.
Oh, right.
So I did that.
Yeah.
And at that time, George was building up a new band.
So you held the practice, did you?
Oh yes, Thursday night was practice night.
Right.
Had been for many, many years.
Yeah.
And he got a number of youngish ringers and a few older ones.
Mm.
And he was building up a new band.
Oh, right.
And we were learning to ring surprise methods.
Yeah. So you'd already progressed quite a long way by.
Well, a bit, yes.
What year? What year are we talking about? When did you
Oh,
come back to Birmingham?
I came back to live here again in 1951,
Right,
beginning
so-
of
so
51.
really from
So
then
this
on.
was about 1949, 1950, when I started going to the cathedral.
Or when you were visiting Birmingham?
And I was made a part-time member of the band.
So that during high school holidays?
Yes.
I see.
Yes, during all the school holidays I was at home.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Yeah.
And that was when I went to the cathedral to ring.
Right.
And then I came home in 1951. I got a posting in the Midlands.
Is that what you'd wanted?
Yes.
Really? Was ringing anything to do with that, or was it really a family thing?
It was a bit of both.
Yeah.
My mother was getting older and I felt I ought to be at home. And at the same time, knowing I could ring a lot more
Yeah.
was an attraction.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
But I would have come home in any case
Yeah.
because of my mother.
Yeah. And you had a teaching job on this side of Birmingham?
No, Sandwell.
Oh, right.
West Bromwich it was then.
Oh, yeah.
I got a job as head of department in the secondary school.
Uh-huh.
And
You
then
enjoyed
we
that?
moved out to Great Bar when they built the comprehensive school. And I got the post then as head of department. And because we had just under 2,000 children, so
Huge job.
I got 7 staff
Yeah.
in the department. Made it very interesting.
So you enjoyed your work?
I had 40 of what I call the good years of teaching.
Yeah.
This form-filling lot was just beginning,
Yeah.
and it's got worse. I mean, now teachers have so little time to prepare. It's no wonder education is dodgy.
Yeah. Yeah. But arts, that somehow is a special place, doesn't it? That
Yes.
Always, people know that it's kind of hands-on. So, when you started going up to school, can you name how many people can you name actually that were there with you? Do you think?
Well, of the band there was Terry Hampton,
Oh yeah.
Jack Pinfold.
Yeah.
Let me have a look at the early fields because a lot of them were in them.
Oh yeah.
Terry Hampton, Jack Pinfold, Arthur Cook, but he always was known as Peter, Ted Lloyd, Tom Abbots. Edgar Shepherd used to join in with the peals occasionally too. Just turning over the pages. Oh, Arthur Pearson. Everybody called him Skinny P.
Yeah.
Henry Fern, of course, as well as George. And Frank Perrons, he was another one who used to ring peals.
Yes, I met him. From Coventry, you mean?
Somewhere in that direction, yes.
Or Kenilworth.
Bill Dowding, he was an ex-policeman.
Oh, yeah. Yes, his photograph's in the bullring, isn't it?
I think it is. And Bill Critchley, Frank Haynes, and of course Albert Walker.
Yes.
That he was really down at the bullring.
Yes. Well, were a lot of these people also down at the bullring or not really?
Well, not to start with. And then we had, in 1951 or 52, we had a new provost. And in those days, the Provost's Lodge was above the buildings in St Philip's Place, and about on the level of the bells.
Yes.
And he hated bells.
Oh.
He didn't tell us we couldn't ring, but he put a service on that cut across our ringing time. And what George said wasn't quite printable.
Yeah.
But it meant, instead of ringing for the 11 o'clock service, we rang for this communion service, which was on at about 9:45. A bit later than that. About 10:15, I think it was.
Right.
So we rang for that, and he still got the bells.
Yes, I see. Yeah. Right.
And then, at that time, the bullring was going through rather a bad period, and we used to go out onto the roof of the cathedral to hear how many bells they were ringing.
Oh, really?
If they couldn't ring 5, they didn't ring.
Yeah.
Some days we couldn't hear them, and we found out they had met 4.
Yeah, gosh, that's poor, isn't it?
And, well, their band consisted mainly of elderly people. Frank Haynes and Sid Holloway, they were the 2 youngest.
Oh, really?
And Frank, I believe, taught Sid, so there was an age gap there.
Yeah.
Then, when the provost changed the times of the services, Albert Walker said, for goodness sake, come and join us, bail us out.
Yes. And in a way, that's continued your...
We amalgamated the band.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, although I don't know, is the ringing at St Philip's at the moment at 11 o'clock?
Yes.
Some people do it.
We managed to get about 8 very often to ring for the 11 o'clock service. Every, on the 2nd and 4th Sunday. And of course on feast days like Easter and so on.
Yeah.
We do get them. I had great hopes that we'll be able to ring there properly when down at St Martin's there was a question about having an extra service. Some people were not happy with this Clap Happy service they have,
Oh, yeah.
particularly the older ones.
Well, sure.
And when the church was done, and they had the service in the church hall, quite a lot of the congregation migrated up the hill to the cathedral, and those who appreciated the more formal service stayed on there, didn't come back.
Yeah.
And there was talk in the church about having 2 services in the morning, the formal service followed by the Clap Happy one. And I thought, now that's marvellous, because we can ring for the earlier service, and if the other one was starting at about 11:15, we could migrate up the hill to the cathedral and ring for the main service there. It could have been done.
Well, yes, I suppose
With
they'll
a
never
little-
arrange it to suit the ringers, will they?
Well, Adrian was willing to listen to us and to try and adjust the times a little bit, so we could do it. If we were ringing for the earlier service, and that was at 10 o'clock,
Yes.
If they made it 9:45, we'd have ample time to get up there and start ringing as normal at 10:10.
Yeah.
And he was quite willing to try this. But I was told that the problem was paying the organist and the choir for another service. They couldn't afford it. How much truth there is in that, I don't know. But certainly it never came to anything.
All right. So anyway, at that time, so from the early 50s then, you went down, you rang at St Philip's and then went down.
And then went down to the cathedral, to the St Martin's.
Where Albert was in charge.
Yes.
Yeah. But George was always in charge, was he?
George was always in charge of the cathedral.
Had there been ringing there before the war?
Oh, yes.
And George had been in charge then?
Yes.
Oh, I see. So.
And during the war, they rang handbells, because of course they couldn't ring the tower bells.
Yeah. On Thursdays?
I think they met. I'm not absolutely certain when they met, but I know George did say that they kept the band together by ringing handbells.
Oh, right.
Kept as many as they could, because of course a lot of them are in the forces.
Yes, and then, so that would have been the Sunday ringing. It wouldn't have been Sunday ringing at Bishop Ryder, would there?
I don't know about during the war, but there was ringing there by the time I started.
Yes. Would it have been on a Sunday there, or would it have been sort of...
I'm a little bit uncertain about that.
Yeah.
They may have managed to do something.
Yeah.
But I was never involved in that. By the time I started, we used to ring peals there.
Yes.
And
well, I was never involved at that time, so I don't remember the building or anything.
well, it was quite interesting because the building eventually was taken down to make room. I think it was for Aston University.
Yes, I believe that.
And
That main road. Yeah.
it was empty for some time, and the caretaker used to let us in on a Monday night to ring peals. Then the electricity was cut off, and we had a storm lantern, and the provost gave us some of the candle ends from the cathedral, and we rang by candlelight.
Yes.
Until in the end, we had to stop because they were about to pull the building down.
What a shame. Yeah, I'm sure you were sorry about that. Yeah. Yes. And of course, Derritent had been, I suppose, demolished soon after the war, probably. Do you remember that?
No, not as early as that. I can't just think when. The bullring was around about the 60s.
Yeah.
When
Was that about the time? I mean, Derritent had been war damaged, of course.
There had been war damage, yes. St John's Church, I believe, went.
Well, that's what I was thinking of, the ring.
Yes.
So you,
But
you
the
wouldn't have
actual
gone
tearing
along.
up of the roads and redoing it like it is now was later.
Yes.
The bullring was damaged during the war, the market hall went,
Yeah.
and after the war they started clearing the site.
Yes.
Then they put the road through, that new ring road, Small Brick Ringway. That went through around about the 60s.
Yeah.
The new buildings went up.
Anyway, didn't Jack Linden live right in the
He
middle?
lived somewhere around there. I'm not
Just
quite
near-
sure where.
Yes, I believe Dale End somewhere.
Somewhere near the church, yes. He used to come in and ring. He was quite a good ringer.
I think Don Finnemore had some connection with him or looked up later.
Of course, Albert Walker was a marvellous conductor for Stedman.
Yeah, quite famous for it. wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then Stedman was the method down there until we joined the band, and then of course a little bit of surprise got run.
Oh, right.
But there was one practice night, Albert Walker was calling a touch, and Henry and I think we were ringing one too. At any rate, we realised we'd crossed over. There was a series of bobs at the back, and we realised we'd crossed over. So the next time we got to the back, Albert Walker called a few more bobs. When we got to the back, we changed back again. And afterwards, Albert was putting bobs in like mad. And he said, "What on earth were you two doing?" He says, "I put you right with calling all those bobs."
Oh,
and then you went and put yourself.
Oh, I see. Right, yeah, I see. Yeah. So, that would have been a Tuesday evening.
Yes, practice now.
Yeah. And what about what's his name? Bill Froggatt? Did he come
Bill
back?
was a real character. He always rang the tenor.
Yeah.
And you know the hat pins behind the tenor box? He used to grab one of those to heave himself up onto the box.
He was a large man.
He was a big, heavy man, yes. And we all used to stand around waiting for the thing to come off the wall, but it never did.
Yeah.
And to begin with, he didn't approve of women in the belfry, and I was the only one, so he just ignored me.
Yeah.
And one
Had
day...
he been there a long time?
Oh, he'd been there for many years. But one day I was in town and I met him and he stopped me. He said, "My sister says I'm an idiot not to talk to you."
Oh, that's nice.
He said,
Yeah.
"So don't say anything to anybody, but on Sunday I'm going to speak to you."
That's a rather eccentric thing to say.
Well, he wanted to give the others a surprise.
Well, at least he was aware of it.
And another good tenorman was Padden Smith.
Oh,
Alf Padden Smith.
yeah.
He was Lord Mayor, of course, at one point.
Did you see him much in the belfry there?
On Sundays.
Oh, really? Yeah.
That he ran the tenor with real style and put it in its place.
Yeah.
When he became Lord Mayor, he had a reception like most of them do.
Yeah.
Of course, we were invited, and our names were announced as we went forward to shake hands. It was very, very formal.
Oh,
Not quite like the reception when a friend of mine, an old colleague, was Lord Mayor, Sue Anderson, where everybody went in and she circulated and spoke to us.
I see you queued up and shook that.
Yes, yes. And we also had the annual meeting that year in the council chamber.
Oh, yes. Oh, that's nice. Yeah. And I believe a handbell peal was rung, wasn't it, in the Lord Mayor's...
There was one. I'm not. You'd have to look through the records
Yes,
to be sure of that. Because
So-
I never got far enough with handbells to ring peals.
Yeah. So down at the bullring, we mentioned a few more people. Can you remember anybody else?
Now, there was another one who
Frank
became Lord Mayor, and I can't just think of his name offhand. He lived out towards Tamworth in Arden.
Pritchard.
That's it.
Yeah.
He used to come to the practices.
Oh, right. What was his first name? I can't remember.
I can't remember that. And of course there was Ted Lloyd came down, Jack Pinfold, the lad you remember that you mentioned who used to live near the church.
Yes, Jack Linden.
Jack Linden, he used to turn up. Albert Walker, of course.
Yeah,
Frank Haynes.
what's his name? Not Alan Short. Did he have anything to do with it?
He was more at Aston.
Yes. Did you know somebody else?
A few of them. We got to know them with ringing. When you had a meeting, because
Yes.
you met everybody.
Yes.
And
do you think Aston had a band at that time, in the 50s?
they had enough to ring, I think, on a Sunday. I wouldn't be certain of it because we didn't go there.
No.
We went for meetings and we went for the occasional peal. But just to ring there, I have a feeling they practiced on a Tuesday as well.
No.
And because we were in the ballroom.
Yes. Alan Short. And then I suppose there was David Brooks.
Yes, he was there. Because David was a small boy at that time.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, we'll come on to the next generation in a little
I
while.
was just trying to think of the names of one or two of the
Well,
older ones.
Frank Smallwood, was he around?
Oh yes,
At the bullring?
yes. And that's another thing. When I became master of the guild, Norman Goodman insisted on calling me his mistress. And he said to Frank Smallwood, had he met his mistress? And Frank was most disgusted. He didn't see the funny side of it.
He was very old-fashioned, I think.
Yes.
Quite old, actually. elderly at that time.
Quite elderly, yes, but still came and he could ring well.
No, we haven't mentioned Norman. So was Norman one of the cathedral people?
Norman came down more to the cathedral. He really, I think, belonged to King's Norton to begin with. But he was certainly one of the Thursday band,
Yeah.
the Peels, and he did come to the cathedral. And so did Rob Kite when he came to Birmingham.
Yeah, I suppose that's getting into the 60s, isn't it?
Yes.
So, King's Norton, did you know any of the old ones? I think, didn't Pritchard have some
I
connection?
think he did. I wouldn't swear to it, but...
Did you know, I mean, just thinking, Bill Cartwright?
Oh yes, I knew Bill.
Did he come into town or not?
No, he was King's Norton at Selly Oak. When I bought this house, of course, he was my solicitor.
Oh, right.
And I said to him, the people who were selling it, they were in a chain,
Yes.
and they wanted to get rid of it quickly. And the previous person, the sale had fallen through. It was almost as though it was kept for me because it came just at the right time after my mother had died, and I wanted a smaller place.
Yeah.
And so I went to Bill and I said, look, there is a case for burying. Do you think you can do it in the time? I said, we've got about a month. Oh, he says, no trouble, we can get that done.
Oh.
In the end, he was waiting for their solicitor,
Yes.
and it was all done and settled in about, less than 3 weeks.
Was your mother's your family in this area?
Yes, it was in front of Beaches Road.
So you went to school somewhere around here, did you?
I went to Moses School of Art.
Oh, yeah. So it was Bill Cartwright. Was Harry with us still there?
Yes.
When did we go?
Now, wait a minute, I'm not sure whether I'm confusing him with the son. The son used to ring at Northfield. And he was...
Right, was there? Oh, right.
I think I did meet old Harry Withers,
Yeah.
but I may, of course, be confusing him with the son. Jack Withers.
I didn't know he got the stuff.
Jack Withers. He worked at the university in the gardens.
Now that puts me in mind of some of the other, you mentioned somebody from Selly Oak, that you met at Northfield. Who you met at Northfield? Jim, the first person you met at Northfield.
Oh, Jim Turner.
Jim Turner, that's right. And there was another,
Jim was one who said I ought to go to the
yes,
cathedral.
that's right. Well, yes, I remember, because Sarah, my wife, used to ring at Selly Oak.
Yes, I remember the ringing there.
Oh, right. And there was another chap who was a gardener. Was his name Bowling or something like that? Or there's another old man at Selly Oak who was he planted all the trees on the Bristol Road.
Oh, no, I don't know that.
I'm sure you'll remember the name when we come across it. Something like Bowling or Dolly. Well, I may. I'll be able to think of that. Anybody else want Selly Oak?
There was the father of a lad, what on earth was he called? He's married and lives down in Cheltenham Road direction. His name. Do you have sugar in coffee?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And some biscuits here.
Oh, wow. Lovely. Thank you very much. Did you ever ring at places like Edgewood?
Yes, oh yes. We used to go all around ringing.
Oh, right.
George used to get towers for Peels during the week.
Yeah.
Thursday was always the cathedral, of course. Tuesday we rang at the Bullring. But the rest of the time, you could ring, well, you could pretty well ring every night of the week if you wanted to.
And they did reckon that we'd ring every night.
just about.
Amazing. That is quite unusual.
When I was working away from home, I used to let George know when the school holiday was on, and I would get a letter back. Be at Riders on Monday night, such and such a time. Tuesday night, the bullring. Wednesday night, Edgbaston. Thursday night, the cathedral. Friday night, somewhere else. And then Saturday, there was always a deal.
Maybe. I mean, did George Fern have any children?
Yes, he had a daughter,
Right.
Ruth. And Ruth is married, and she has a daughter who's also married, and I think she's got one child.
Oh, right.
Because Doris died a few years ago.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah, because you kept in touch with her. So Ruth Fern, does she live somewhere around?
She lives in Hall Green.
So she, and of course Henry Fern had a daughter as well.
Yes, I think she went up to Scotland.
Yes, that's right. We just, I even met her at the funeral. She looked just like him, actually.
She did, yes.
Not surprising, in a way. How could you look like that?
And Henry, he always used to come on Thursday night to see George. And if somebody was stuck in the traffic and couldn't get there on time, or they met one short, George would turn round to him and say, "Come on, our kid," because he was always known as our kid. He'd say, "Come on, our kid, we need you."
Yeah.
And he would winkle him in.
Yeah.
If it was a method he didn't know, he rang the treble.
Yeah.
And after a while, Henry got fed up with this. And you would know perfectly well that he was in the area. But you would never see him until you got a complete band outside the cathedral door, and then he would materialise.
Yeah.
A bit like the Cheshire Cat.
All right. Yeah. And that would normally be an 8-bell field, would it?
Yes. Yes, we started on 8 with this band ringing surprise methods, and then worked up to the 10. And then in, I think it was 1952, we were given the 2 trebles.
Yeah. Yeah. Now
And
that was from
when we went
Frank
on to 12.
Yates, wasn't it?
That's right, yes. I think he came from somewhere Tamworth in Arden way.
Again, I think he was connected with Kingston Norton, wasn't he? Yeah. And he also, presumably, did he come into St. Philip's, or was it just that George knew he had willingness?
At the time when we had the bells, I don't think it was very well, because George went to the telephone box by the cathedral, and he dialed his number and held the phone outside the box,
right. No, that's
so that he could hear the bells.
At the dedication or something like that?
No, this was one evening,
Oh,
we
one
were
evening.
ringing, when the traffic was quiet.
Oh, I see. Oh, that's charming. Yeah.
But at least he heard them.
Yeah. And were they at that time noisier outside? I mean, or had George made the arrangement to have them
I
break up?
think that there have been some sacrifices done
Because obviously that,
to make them sound even.
yeah, I mean, the quietness of the bells immediately around is obviously a great asset
Yes.
for ringers.
But the place to hear them best was always by the bank on Cherry Street corner, just round there.
Yeah.
You could hear them better.
Yes, and you still can.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So well, it's quite a list of names. Now we need a few anecdotes. But Henry Fern was always a great source of anecdotes.
Well, Henry and George were both characters.
Very different, weren't they?
Yes.
And I believe it was.
Never biscuit.
I believe it was that Henry introduced George to ringing.
Yes, I think
He asked him to come with
that
him.
may well be.
So Eric Cole had become Henry's
And
contact, I believe.
yes, Eric Cole was another character.
Ah, right. Where did he mainly ring?
Hampton and Arden and Soley Hull.
Yes, that's right.
When I
with,
knew him.
Presumably with Edgar Shepherd then.
But he did come down to the cathedral and ring occasionally. He would come down for weddings. And didn't usually come on practice night, but he would come and ring a peal occasionally.
And then, of course, George Chaplin, his father,
Yes, old George.
What's he called, Old George?
Father George more often than not. And he rang at the bullring.
Yeah.
The two bands were very much mixed up
Yeah.
after we had to change the times of ringing at the cathedral.
And then, so people met on a Sunday morning. Did they tend to go home after ringing, or did they hang about?
We generally met and rang at the cathedral. Then we went to Lyon's coffee shop,
Which was where?
which was opposite the rotunda in those days.
Right. Before the rotunda was built?
Yeah, we watched the rotunda being built.
Oh, right. In the
It took
50s.
them weeks and weeks to dig out the foundations.
Yes, sure.
And after that, it went up about 1.5 stories a week.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And then we used to go down to the bullring and ring.
Yeah.
And some people still do go on to some chats.
Yes, well, I do.
Mhm.
Yeah. I see. So there was a band at St. Chad's.
Yes, but
I suppose Wilf Box was.
that's right.
Have you been there?
and he occasionally came to the bullring to ring.
Apparently he had a rather alarming ringing style.
Yes.
He wasn't a great ringer, so I gather. Did you know was there anybody else at St. Chad's? Was Tom Miller still alive?
The name rings a bell, but I wouldn't be sure whether people spoke about him or whether I actually met him.
Yeah.
If I did, it was right at the beginning.
Yes, because I think he died about 1950.
Something, yes.
And probably, I think James George died about then.
Yes, now there again, I'm not certain that I met James George, but certainly I heard about him.
Yeah, it was just that time.
There was a lot of talk about him, and his appeal book had to be left on the table at St. Martin's. But I think in the interests of safety it was put away in the cupboards.
Yeah, well, it was obviously a bit, what's the word, a bit egocentric.
Yes, he had a bomb on himself. There was a man who went out towards Evesham Way, I think it was, or it might have been more towards Stratford Way. He used to come down. I can't think what his name was.
Oh, would that have been a chap who still turns up from time to time?
He's getting on it.
Weather-beaten chap, or his father. I know who you mean. From near Pershore, isn't it?
Somewhere down that way.
The market garden.
Oh, I know who you're thinking of. No, that's not the person.
His name escapes me.
I occasionally get rung up by the son.
Oh, yeah.
I can't think of his name.
Oh, it'll come to us.
Yes.
Yeah.
No,
Oh, somebody else.
This person
Yeah.
was elderly at the time,
Yeah.
and he used to come to the practices. And once or twice when we were ringing, and I was trying to ring something, he'd stand behind me.
Oh,
And he was very good at that, because he never told you. Occasionally, if he saw you wavering, he would just point to the bell.
so he didn't give you too much.
He didn't give you so much instruction, you felt you weren't doing it.
Yes. Check 19. Still doing that. Yep. All right. And what about up Erdington Way or Handsworth Way? Was there anybody out that way?
We didn't ring a lot out there. Occasionally we went for fields.
Perry Bar.
Yes, we rang once or twice at Perry Bar, but I can't think who was in charge.
Did you go to Bishop Latimer at the time when the bells were there?
Once or twice I rang on them, just before they were taken out.
Yes.
I think we made the effort to ring before they were taken out.
Yes. It always looks a marvellous tower.
I think it was only about once I went.
Yeah.
I know it was a case of it was unstopped opportunity.
Yeah.
Of course, riders were taken out before the church was.
Yeah, so of
removed.
course, this is horrible.
And
Did you go
remember
to
the
Harbour
old-
at all? Did you go to Harbour?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
yes, we used to use there too. But we occasionally went to the breakfast.
Would there have been anybody there not so far mentioned? I think there was a naval.
Oh, wait a minute. Fletcher, the father of the daughter, ran. Evelyn Fletcher, she was. She's married now, and I seem to associate them with Harborne.
And there's also Victor somebody, whose son is now out at that three-bell tower beyond something.
Yes, there was somebody called Vic.
Vic Sally Oak. I forget the second name, but wasn't he famous for coming on a trip or going with Henry Byrne on a trip to Bristol, having met him at Sally Oak while they were waiting for a bus to go to Bristol?
Don't
He
recall
agreed
that.
to come,
May have been before my time.
and when he got back, he said, with Henry, and said, should we have a drink before going home? He said, this was on the Sunday evening, he said, I better not, I only popped out for a loaf of bread.
That sounds like Henry or George.
Yes, well, I think it was this chap, whoever his name was. So Terry Hampton, I mean, if I go down the list, can you remember, I mean, I suppose he's still going strong in Devon, is he?
He's living near Barnstaple.
Yes.
He wasn't very well.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it was given up when he was a result or not. We usually send cards at Christmas,
He,
and his wife.
was he a Brumming?
I think so. He worked at Dunlop.
Yes, I think he had quite a good career
A
there.
good job, yes.
Yeah. But, I mean, did he live on that side of town?
Four Oaks.
Yeah.
When he and Anne got married. I can't remember where he lived before marriage.
He was rather well known, wasn't he, for always ringing the 8th.
He usually ran round there because he got to know what the 8th was like. Those three bells on the top frame
Yeah.
were a bit of a handful at times.
Yeah.
And Terry knew it well. He did usually ring that.
Yeah.
It was 789, I think, was on
Yeah.
the top frame.
Yeah.
Because you know we're having to stop ringing.
I've heard, yes.
Sapcoats have got to do some work on the tower. And they're doing another job nearby. They said they could do the two together. And then Whitechapel have got to come in. Who want some work on the bells and the frame. And they're busy. They can't come in immediately. Sapcoats start. So there's going to be a bit of a gap. And it's going to
Yeah.
get towards Christmas before we can ring again.
Oh, well, I mean, if it does what's necessary.
Yes.
Yeah. So, there's not much really to say about Terry. Apart from he was obviously a keen ringer. Was he in all the fields?
Oh, he was one of the
Yeah.
Thursday band.
Always.
Most times, yes, he was very rarely absent.
Yeah. Jack Penfield.
Of course, Jack was older.
He was a brother.
As far as I know, he was a bookbinder.
Oh, yeah.
And he bound my field book for me.
Oh, that?
Lovely.
Did he? Yeah. Where did he work? Where was his work, you know?
I'm not quite certain, somewhere in town.
Yeah.
I can't
I think
remember.
of course, George Chaplin went to that.
George got the present bookbind for us. He knew him.
But I mean, I think George Chaplin himself was a bookbinder.
I'm not sure what George did.
Yeah. And Jack Penfield. I suppose, did you ever get to know? I mean, did did these people? Did you ever get to know about their family lives, or did they tend to be rather sort of
not a
private?
lot. I mean, you knew the ones who were married and the ones who weren't.
Yes.
But
Yes.
they didn't have a lot to say.
No.
George was the one that whose family I knew best. I knew Doris.
Oh, right.
Because sometimes, if we'd gone at a distance, we'd have in the car, I'd give George a lift and drop him home, and he'd say, well, come in and have a cup of tea. And I got to know Doris.
Oh, so you drove George around, practically?
A number of times, yes. The rest of the time, of course, he cycled.
Yeah. Did he go quite a long way?
Well, he cycled down to Evesham and back.
Would he really? Yeah. That's quite a step. Yeah. Oh. Arthur Cook, Peter Cook, was it?
His family name was Peter. He told me once that his proper name was Arthur, and so was his father.
No, I see.
And one day he said to the family, I never know whether it's me or my dad you're talking to, so you can call me Peter.
Right.
And they did.
Okay. Did you call him Peter?
We all knew him as Peter.
Oh, I see. Right. And so who was he?
He rang at Surrey Hull quite a bit. He's out living near Kidderminster now.
Still around.
And he's not doing the ringing he used to do. But I got in touch with him again because of that badge that was given to George.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember?
Yes,
he used
I
to
do.
wear it in his lapel.
Yes, and the one you've now got framed.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
it. And when he died, it was given to Jack Milhouse.
Yeah.
When Jack Milhouse died, it was given to somebody else up in Lincoln. Get the name. Anyway, he sent it to me. He said he felt it ought to be back in Birmingham. And I had it framed, and I did a bit of research work, and I couldn't find my little booklet, which gives you all the maker's marks and the year marks. So I took it into the assay office, and they sorted it out when it was made and who by. And I couldn't understand why it was bought in Birmingham when it was sold some distance away. I think it was somewhere in the Cotswolds. Anyway, I put a little article in the Ringing World about it. I thought people might be interested, and in any case, the people in Lincoln would know what we were doing with it.
Yes.
And Peter Cook and Dick Haddon were the two who had given it to George, because he taught them to ring. And this was a little thank you for what he'd done.
Right. Who was Dick Haddon?
Now, Dick Haddon went abroad. I think his work was something to do with atomic work.
Yeah.
And he went abroad, so he gave up ringing. I never knew him. But of course we'd run with Peter Cook. And Peter Cook replied to this and said that he would like to meet Doris again. So I put him in touch with her. They did have a bit of a conversation, I think on the phone.
Yeah.
And I think he went to see her. I'm not quite certain.
So what sort of job did he do?
I'm not certain. He's living out at Close Top near Kidderminster. But he'll be retired now.
Yeah. So now we're on to Ted Lloyd.
Well, Ted worked for Renson's, I think it was. It was one of those firms.
Is that an engineering firm?
No, grocers.
No, I see.
I don't think they are trading under that name now. You don't seem to see Renson shops. They must have given up. But he always used to tell a story about two grocers. And one, they put up the notice, bacon, only 2 and 4pence a pound. So the other one reduced his to 2 and 3pence. And the first one came down.
It's quite, I mean, he died fairly recently, didn't he?
Ted, a few years back.
Was it? Yeah, I can remember him. Yeah, quite a round face. Jolly
That's
man.
right, a jolly faced person,
Yes.
good complexion.
Yeah, yeah. I've never heard of Tom Abbott's.
Tom Abbott was killed in an accident on the road. He used to ride a motorbike, and he was killed in an accident. I don't think he was very old.
Is that the one who's commemorated at Soho? So, you know, there's
I'm not sure. I didn't associate Tom with
death in a
Soho.
motor at Soho. And I don't know if it, might not be that one.
No, I don't think it is. I can remember him. He was a tallish, well-made fellow,
Yeah.
and I suppose he would be probably in his 20s
Yeah.
when I knew him.
I think, at that time road accidents were particularly bad, weren't they? Yeah. Edgar Shepherd.
Oh, now Edgar, he was a dab hand at Stedman, another one.
Yeah, he wrote quite a lot, wasn't
He was a teacher,
he? Yeah, head
head
teacher.
teacher, and we went to Bicknell, I think it was. At any rate, we ran a field of plain bob doubles, plain bob minor, and it had a footnote, run without bobs. The only calls he made were singles.
No, no.
If he put a bob in, I think we'd have lost the field.
Yeah.
Oh, and there was one night, George was going to Shirley to ring. I think it was a field of Cambridge. At any rate, he cycled up to Shirley after listening to the 6 o'clock news. They rang the peal, and for some reason they got into a fairly fast speed.
No,
He cycled home again, and he listened to the 9 o'clock news.
Yeah. Well, surely actually that's when they are.
They turn quickly, don't they?
Still, that's still.
It was a pretty quick field. He said if anybody had just hesitated, they'd have lost it.
Yeah. Of course, Edgar took quite an interest in history himself.
Yes, he did. He wrote a book, didn't he, about semi-holidays.
Was he captain at Solihull?
No, he was. I can't just think. Oh, and another old character was Tom Reeves.
Oh, yes.
He was secretary when I joined the Bantling Guild.
Yes, that's going back.
And he was the 4th secretary to do exactly 20 years.
Yes.
And George was the last one.
Yes.
There was a run of them over 100 years. Just the 5 secretaries, each one doing 20 years.
Amazing. Yeah. So, he was still ringing in the 50s, wasn't he?
Oh yes.
Yeah. Where did he ring first?
Tom Reeves,
Yeah.
the Bull Ring.
Yeah.
That's where I always met him.
Yeah. And what was he? I mean, he must have been quite old.
He was elderly, yes. He could ring all right, get up the tower and ring all right. He may have looked a bit older than he actually was.
No. You know what he did for a job?
I can't just think. He was, wore glasses, he was round-faced.
There was a photograph of him.
And when he came to the dinner, of course in those days, you paid 1 6d a quarter for your membership.
Oh, really?
1 6 was the membership, and the other 4 6 went towards your dinner ticket. So if you were a member, you only paid 4 shillings your dinner ticket instead of 8 and 6. And nobody dared ask for their 4 and 6 back, because Tom Reeves would say, "Look, you're supposed to turn up at the dinner. You should do so."
Oh, really? So everybody did.
It's doing it that way. It certainly eased the strain in days when people didn't earn much money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes. It sounds a little amount, enough amount now, but actually it would have been quite
Well,
a lot.
if you were only earning 50 shillings or even less,
Yeah.
£2.10 to live on, it could be done. Of course, it was.
Yes. And yes, it's difficult to. I mean, because beer wouldn't cost. Wouldn't cost now, wouldn't it? I should just show you these photographs, because it's just they're a miscellaneous collection. It's just over loose, as it were. So I thought that'd be a place to start. I think you'll recognise.
That's Albert Walker.
Yes.
That's George Chaplin Senior, and that's his son.
That's right. Yes. Yes.
Oh, you got it.
He wrote some of that.
Yes.
That's James George. I think at
Yes.
I think
Bishop
that,
Riders.
Yes. Although the photograph looks like the bull ring, doesn't it?
It does.
Actually? I think the photograph must be. Although there was something about Bishop Riders, I think James George must have been in charge at Bishop Riders.
Yeah,
His name's on the bell, on the tenor, I think, when they were recast.
That looks like Tom Reeves.
Yes. All right. Yes, probably is, isn't it? Can you name
It's
it?
a little bit like him.
Yes, I think you could well.
Did you have to put a name to some of them?
That'll be George.
George, yes.
On the right hand side. Yes.
To see if our kid was there, but don't see him.
You don't think that could, don't think
Too tall. Henry was quite a bit shorter than George.
Yeah. No. Let me just go on. Is that? Are you in that picture?
I think it may well be me next to Albert Walker.
Yeah. Yes, I think it might be.
I won't swear to it, but it looks a bit like
Yeah.
it. I was thin in those days. That's me on the left.
Oh yes.
That's George. That's
John Anderson.
Frank Hayes.
Oh, that's Frank Hayes in the front. Yeah.
Bishop Sinker.
That's Rod and
Rod,
John.
yes.
Isn't it? Who's that?
That's what I was looking at. Not put a name to it at the moment. There's somebody tucked away behind there.
Critchley is another name we have.
Bill Critchley.
Bill Critchley. Did we mention him? Perhaps we did.
And yes, I can't think what he did. Eventually, he left the area. They married a girl who came into the area.
Yeah.
She wasn't very popular, unfortunately. But,
Is she a ringer?
Yes. I can't think of her name at the moment. But she was inclined to stir things up.
Oh dear. You know who that is?
I ought to.
Could it be Arthur Pearson?
No,
Or one of
no.
those?
I can't name
No,
it
I
at
don't
the
know who
moment.
it is.
It doesn't look unlike Sid Holloway, but I
Oh,
can't
could be.
remember
Yes.
whether Sid made speeches or not. It
No, right.
looks a bit like him.
Yes. Because I do just remember him when I first came to Bullring. He was still
Yes.
going there on a Sunday. Well, we've got a whole set of these, haven't
Yes.
we? But I just wondered if, there are any that just...
The younger George, the older George, Chaplin.
Chaplin, yes. Where would the dinner have been held?
I would say it was the Imperial.
Very grand.
Looks a bit like it.
Yeah, right. Yes. Long gone.
We had our dinners there regularly for a long time. Oh, that, I think, is Bill Turner. There's,
Oh yes, Jim Turner.
Jim Turner.
It looks like him, I agree. Yes. Yeah.
Offhand, I can't put.
Yeah.
I ought to know that one, but I can't put a name to him.
It's funny, isn't it, how easy it is to be... Could that be Albert Norman? Did you know him? Because
Yes.
there's a picture of him in the tower,
Mm-hmm.
and it just occurred to me that it looks a bit...
What date was this?
1950, I think.
Well, I would just have started
Yes.
ringing with the Birmingham group then.
Yes.
I can't remember which was the first one I played to, about 49, I think.
I see.
I
Yeah.
haven't missed one since.
Haven't you really? Good gracious. That's an all-time record. I don't suppose there's anybody else who's never missed one, is there?
Well, I wouldn't like to say.
I doubt it.
I think that might be Skinny Pig.
Oh, really? Uh-huh.
That could be his wife. She was an attractive woman.
Yeah. Did wives come to dinners?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
That looks a little bit like John Pinfold in the background.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh. Was he white-haired?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. No, I don't know. I mean, that's Frank Banks, who was the tower keeper.
Mm-hmm.
You know, who he fell down the stairs and died, didn't he, on New Year's Eve or something?
I'm not
But-
sure about that.
Yes, I've heard the story.
Yes. No, I never did.
It's not a nice picture. This is the 14, in the 1920s, 14
Oh, yes.
band. But
They were a little bit before my
yeah,
time.
absolutely, yes, because that's John Carter there.
Yes.
I don't know if there's anybody who's that. We've got the details somewhere, but
Yes.
Now, what do you think about that outdoor?
George Hearn.
Yes. Garden, deck chairs. I wonder where they could have been. Could they have been watching cricket or something?
I don't think George would be watching cricket
He
somehow.
never did.
Could it be Solihull?
Oh, I see. Right.
If there was something on there.
Must have been something on, mustn't there? Yes. I mean, presumably it's a Peel band or something like
That's-
that, isn't it?
I think that's Albert Walker, whatever.
Yes,
the other.
yes, looks like it, doesn't it?
I ought to know him, but I can't put a name to him. Would that be Bill Critchley?
Oh, yes, I don't know. Have a look at them.
Could be.
Yeah.
Our kid isn't there. And then that's another one I ought to know, but I can't put a name to.
Could that possibly be Wilfred Williams? Just got that sort of
Could be.
square face.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, and it's a pity, nobody wrote on the back.
Yes.
It's a crime, isn't it?
Taken up on the roof somewhere.
Yes, presumably at St Philip's, I assume, because of the shape of that window.
Yes.
So you went out there to listen to see if you could hear.
Yes, he used to go out on the roof to try and hear how many they were ringing.
Yes.
When
You
it
wouldn't
was
be able to
still.
hear it now, would you?
Depends on the traffic.
Do you think you ever could?
And of course there were more buildings round.
Yes.
No.
I don't imagine you could. Well, that's Padden, isn't it?
Yes.
But who would that be? Would that just
That's what I was wondering.
you know, is it his secretary perhaps, or
Could be,
his
yeah.
assistant or something? That's
That will be the George again, won't it? James George.
James George, that's right, with George.
George.
And Henry, surely. That's Henry?
I'm not sure. That's a bit like the one who went to Allen Hall Way. Can't put a
Yeah.
name to him.
Yeah. Well, of course I could
You
look
can
up
get
the
that
date
up,
of the Peel
it's the
book.
Peel, yes.
I could get that out.
That will give you that.
That's right. That's rather a nice picture, isn't it?
Yes. Oh, that's George.
Yeah.
Now, Percy, what was his other name?
I think he said that. Has he got it on the back? Percy Richards.
That's it,
We
yes.
haven't mentioned him before.
He used to ring occasionally with us for quite a spell.
I seem to think he had a reputation for not being a very reliable ringer,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not.
Yes,
sure.
George Fern, Percy Richards, Henry, Edward Lloyd. Yes.
Now, have you any idea who that could be? Because he's at Colebrookdale. Obviously a ringer at Colebrookdale. Wilf Box had some connection with Colebrookdale.
Tell you who might be able to help you. The North Staffordshire group who go out on Tuesday.
Oh, yes. Because...
Come out with us one day
okay,
and ring
so-
it.
Okay.
There's Marianne Owen
Mm.
from Stafford, she's one of the ones who organise it, and Tony Dawes' father, Ray,
Oh, yes.
he
Oh, no.
organises quite a lot of the ringing,
All right.
but
Whereabouts do you go?
all over.
Really?
We were in Shropshire, we went to Norton in Hayes and Cheswardine on
right.
Tuesday.
Oh, this last?
Yes,
Oh, I see. How many people go?
anything up to 30.
Really? Huh? Yeah, that's about the last. That's the
Yes.
last one. But,
That of course is Albert,
Albert.
and that's
is that Frank Small?
yes, Frank Smallwood.
And George Swan. I
That's
think,
it.
right?
Yes,
We
I was
didn't
trying to
mention
think of
him.
his name.
No. Where did he ring? Does he at the bull ring a lot?
At the bullring.
Yeah.
Yes, you got the names down.
Oh well. You know, it's just some of these. You know, if I can find out.
Yes. Well, some
What
of them,
they are, they
you
were-
can remember the faces, but it was so long ago you can't always remember the
No,
name.
I know. Well, I can't remember that man. Tom Boylin, I think his name was, the man at Selly Oak, who was a gardener. But, his name's on a field board there.
No. Haslam,
Yes.
Keith Haslam,
Yes.
he might be able to help you with some of the ones from Selly Oak.
Yes, that's true.
His phone number is 458 2635.
Yeah, I haven't met him for a long time actually, but I used to know him. Yeah, his children.
Yes,
Quite
because
love
they're
that.
growing up now.
Yeah.
And what's his name? Richard Can from Solly Hull.
Yeah.
He's been ringing a long time, and he may be able to give you some help. His phone number's not in there, just a moment. It should be.
Well, I can find that.
His phone number is 704 4962. Yes, he should be able to help you with some of the older ones because he's been ringing at Solly Hull for quite a long time.
Yeah. Yes, they've got quite a lot of nice things, I photographs and things on all that.
Yes,
Really good.
it's quite a while since I ran there. We went once with the Monday group.
Oh,
Not Monday, the Wednesday group.
oh, yeah.
First Wednesday, that's the Birmingham lot.
Oh, that's a different.
There are two lots. The Birmingham group is organised by Dennis Clive and Brian
Brian
Downey,
Yeah.
and we go out on the first Wednesday of the month.
Yeah.
And the North Staffordshire group organise theirs. Marianne Owen is one of the leading lights there. and we go out on the third Tuesday, but we amalgamate.
Right. So you've got a fortnightly outing.
Yes.
Basically, that's good. Yeah. Wait, did you used to go on outings or not really? It was only peels perhaps.
We were too busy ringing peals.
Yeah. How far away did you go? What are your most memorable trips?
I think.
Did you go down to London, for example?
I rang a peal at Croydon with George. We went down there, and Ted, what was he called? George's friend. I can't think of his surname, but he organised it. I've rung at St Paul's too.
Oh, really?
That was rather interesting. I'd gone down for a Cumberland dinner,
Yeah.
and of course met all my ringing friends.
Yes.
And this particular friend of George's rang at St Paul's. Anyway, he said, come down and listen to them on the Sunday. So I did. And when I was outside, he says, you don't want to listen to them here. He says, come on up into the belfry and listen to them. You can hear them better there, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And when I went up, Alf Peck said, would you like to ring? And gave me his rope. And you could have cut the atmosphere with a knife, you know, this is going to be rough stuff. Anyway, because it made me more determined than ever, I jolly well put my bell in its place. You could feel the atmosphere change.
Still,
sort
that
of
sounds
free,
fascinating. Yes.
easy.
Yes.
And I came away with an invitation to go back any time.
And you must have been one of the very few.
Absolutely. I was one of the very few women who'd rung at St Paul's then.
Yeah. What year was
Jack
that?
Deal's wife, I think, had rung. I think we would be about the only two.
What year was that?
Oh, in the 50s. I'm not sure which one. I could find out by looking through a appeal book and finding when I ran appeal at...
Oh, yeah, well, may I have a quick leaf through your field book? That's all right. That's a beautiful
That's
thing.
just the first 100.
Oh, it's just the first 100, right.
I know Jack says, when are you going to do the others? But I was so busy ringing peals, I didn't have time to write them out.
No, right. But you did have an interest in calligraphy.
Oh, yes.
So,
Well, it was one of the things that I was taught at college, and I did teach some of the children a bit.
Fantastic. Wouldn't have taken you a short time to do these, would it? Gosh. Yeah. No, that's very... So your second field is in Birmingham?
Yes, we met one short at Horwich, and they said, well, you're not going back to Birmingham without a field, so we ran with one on the 6th. I think it was Horwich. And then I came home, and George says, Time, you rang a peal down here. And he got one organised.
Well, oh, these are so beautiful. I mean, they will have taken you a long time to create. I suppose you will have sketched them out in pencils, carefully measured the...
I used to measure the lines for the
I
writing,
mean, that's fantastic.
and decide where I wanted the decoration.
Yeah. Amazing. Stedman triples. Always a breakthrough, I reckon, when you bring a field Stedman. It's so easy to lose.
They can be easily lost.
Yeah.
There was one occasion we were ringing Grandsire, and at the back, Henry and I were quite in the right position, and they came round as clean as a whistle 132. How we changed over, we don't know. George tells him that it is here a couple of twerps. That was at Riders.
So you did ring another one in Lancashire?
I ran several in Lancashire.
Oh yes, several in Lancashire,
I think it got to about the first 70 peals.
Oh really?
I ran quite a few in Lancashire.
Yes, it's a lovely tower.
Yes.
Oh gosh. Well, I like the Christmassy theme. Holly and mistletoe. Little Norwich. Are you in touch at all with any of them who live up that way?
Most of them have died now. Geoffrey Fothergill I occasionally hear from. Not very often, I'm afraid.
Oh, John Mason, Stan Mason.
Oh yes, he was in the Air Force.
Right, yes. And Cliff Skidmore.
Yes. Now he came from over Riley Hill way somewhere. He used to come and
Yes,
with us.
Brownie Hill. Of course, he was only fairly recently that he died.
Yes.
I remember him very well. Nice, friendly man.
Yes, he often joined us for a meal.
Gosh, fantastic. Anybody, I mean, people admired this book, I hope. It hasn't just been shut all the time.
It's usually shut away.
Yes, that's right. Lovely. Daffodils for the spring. Sketch of Standish. That's interesting.
Yes, it is quite an interesting place.
Sort of involved. Hubert Shepherd. Any relation?
Yes, brother.
Oh, I've never heard of
America.
that. Okay.
He didn't ring with us a lot.
No.
In fact, I don't think he did a lot of ringing by the time I knew him.
Well, I'm just amazed. By far the most beautiful fields I've ever seen.
Well, you've seen
And
the
quite a
ones-
lot of people start off with very good intentions, don't they? And then when they get to about page 10.
Well, I got a bit beyond that when I found I was ringing them and hadn't got the time to keep up.
I think actually that doesn't it?
This is my other Peel book.
I see it all the whole lot.
Yes,
Yeah.
very tatty affair.
Well, and what's the exact score? You did read one fairly recently.
I ran my last Peel for my 80th birthday,
Oh, right, that's
and I said, right, that's it.
So I've just come across another name here, Frank Purvis.
Oh yes, he used to ring with us quite a bit.
I've seen this name around. And John A.L. Thompson.
Now, I only got up to my 1000th Peel in here, the rest are in another book.
Oh, I see.
I'm
So
not-
how many more do you think?
About another between 30 and 40.
Oh, I see.
I was already getting arthritis in the hand
Yeah,
and slowing down on the peels.
yeah.
But when I'd run the one for my 80th birthday, standing, I was getting a lot of pain on my legs.
Yeah.
And it takes away your concentration.
Yes.
And I said, right, that's my last peel. I thought it was a good time to stop.
Yeah. Well, you're kind of comfortably over the house, so there's no doubt, is there? You know, somebody won't suddenly write in and say, you know, this peel was false, and so, you know, you're not in danger of losing the magic figure. But I think so wise.
I got that out because I thought it would remind me of some of the ringers who were around when I was starting.
John Scott, that's not a name I've written down.
He didn't do a lot of fiddle ringing, but I can't think just where he went.
Eric Speak. Oh, I see.
Oh yes, Eric used to ring with us
He
quite
was
a
a
bit.
keen ringer. Oh, it's the celebrated engagement of Terry Hampton.
and I forget what her surname was.
Baxter. Oh, there's a picture of West Ham. Oh,
West Hawthorne it was pronounced.
yes. Netherton. Handy town to go to.
Where was that?
Netherton.
Oh yes,
We used to go there
quite a bit, yes.
Because it's out on the top of the hill there, isn't it? So it's, you feel that fields would be acceptable. Not heard much of it.
Old Hill was another one that went through
Oh yeah.
occasionally.
Did you used to go sort of on the train or by bus or driving?
Until I got my car, it was a case of public transport.
Yeah.
We used to go to Rock, go out as far as the Collier's Arms on the bus, and then walk from there.
Right. Anthony Cleaver.
Oh yes, he rang at Surrey Hope. But he came in and ran fields with us occasionally.
Yeah. Rodney Meadow.
Yes, he was a good ringer. Came from the London area.
Yeah. Did you get the pictures of the churches from a photograph or something? Or did you go there?
Some of them I've used a postcard picture, and some of them I went and drew them.
No, did you? So how common was it to have a 12-bell deal in those days?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Well, we used to go for Thursday, but not all of them were 12-bell fields. I think it depended partly on how many people were free.
Yes. Yes. Keen enough to do it every week. It's remarkable.
There was a hardcore of ringers in those days who were there every week.
Yeah.
But as I said, when George was getting his band together, we started off on the 8th, and we rang 8 until we could ring them well,
Yes.
and then we moved on to 10 and 12.
And then I suppose, in the 60s or something, people like Rod and
Yes, they were around.
David Cornell.
Critchley, Claudia, his wife, for the lady American, she was around.
John May.
Yes, he was here for a time. He was at the university.
Mac.
Yes.
Yes, that seems to usher in a new generation.
Yes, the young ones started to come along.
And Albert Walker died in what?
61, I think it was. Somewhere around about that, the early 60s.
Well, that is a fantastic book. It's an artwork, isn't it? Beautifully bound, too.
I reckon John made a jolly good job of that.
Feels really kind of
Heavy, isn't it?
substantial, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Good. Well, thank you, Muriel. I think perhaps we. I don't want to tire you out completely.
Well, I have
you
to
know.
go out at about